Today, we are diving into one of history's great paradoxes, the story of India's independence. It's an incredible story that kicks off with this revolutionary idea of peace, but ends in a tragedy that almost no one saw coming.
And this is the question at the heart of it all. How did a movement led by Mahatma Gandhi, the global icon of peace, end with the country being split in two, a partition that left an estimated 1 million people dead? It's just a staggering contradiction. And to get our heads around it, we really have to go back to the beginning.
So, in its early days, the Indian independence movement wasn't really about, revolution. It was mostly a group of Western-educated elites. They weren't trying to kick the British Empire out, they were just trying to get a seat at the table. They wanted reform.
So what was fueling their frustration? Well, it all boiled down to this glaring double standard. The British were all about democracy and individual rights for themselves, back home, but they denied those very same rights to Indians. And this fundamental hypocrisy, it became the engine for a growing sense of nationalism.
And you could just see the pressure building over time. In 1905, Britain carves up the state of Bengal without asking anyone, sparking huge outrage. Then comes World War I, and 1 million Indians go off to fight for the empire. People started asking, wait, what exactly are we sacrificing for? But the real breaking point comes in 1917. Britain makes this vague promise of responsible government to keep India on its side during the war. But as soon as the war is over, they go back on their word. Any trust that was left was just shattered. And this is where the whole story takes a massive turn. Because of this deep sense of betrayal, the movement shifts. It's not about asking for reform anymore, it's about demanding full independence. And the person at the center of that transformation is, of course, Mahatma Gandhi.
Gandhi's real genius was his ability to bridge this huge gap in Indian society. You had the English-speaking elites on one side, and then millions of rural Indians who couldn't read or write on the other. And he built a bridge between them by speaking a language that everybody understood: spirituality. This quote right here gets to the absolute core of his philosophy. For Gandhi, the revolution had to start inside. He believed political freedom meant nothing if you weren't spiritually free first. His whole argument was that before Indians could demand respect from the British, they had to cultivate self-respect within themselves.
And this comparison really shows you just how radical Gandhi's idea was. I mean, think about it. Karl Marx said you have to change the system first, the economy, the politics, and that's what frees the individual. Gandhi completely flipped that on its head. He said, no, you have to transform the individual soul first, and then political change will follow naturally.
His technique for this was called Satyagraha, which literally means the search for truth. And let's be clear, this was not passive resistance. It wasn't about just taking it. It was an active spiritual discipline. The goal wasn't to crush your enemy, but to actually touch their heart and make them see the truth. The power wasn't in your ability to hurt others, but in your own willingness to suffer for what you believed in.
Okay, so how does this deep spiritual idea actually translate into action? Well, it became the foundation for one of the biggest mass movements in human history. It was a powerful political weapon that millions of ordinary people could actually use.
He taught this really disciplined form of civil disobedience, but with a brilliant twist. Protesters would intentionally break a law they knew was unjust, but then they would willingly accept the punishment. They wouldn't fight back. This showed their spiritual strength and, weirdly, their respect for the idea of law, even as they were protesting a bad one. And the psychological effect was huge. If you're not afraid of going to jail, the government's main tool for scaring you just stops working.
The most famous example of this has to be the Salt March in 1930. Gandhi started this march to the sea with just 80 followers to protest a British tax on salt. That tiny group grew into thousands, and their simple act of making salt illegally became this powerful symbol of defiance that the whole country could understand and get behind.
His other great symbol was the simple spinning wheel. Now, on one level, it was an economic weapon. He was telling Indians, stop buying British clothes, make your own. But on a much deeper, spiritual level, he asked every single Indian to spend half an hour a day just spinning thread. It was this daily, meditative act designed to unite 300 million people in a shared purpose, to get them ready for what it meant to be free. And these mass campaigns were incredibly effective. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, the British were slowly but surely forced to hand over more power. And then, finally, after World War II, a much weaker Britain agreed to negotiate full independence. But just as the dream of freedom was about to become real, a terrible, tragic flaw in the movement was exposed.
And this is where we get to that central paradox. The very thing that gave the movement its incredible strength, religion, also turned out to be its fatal flaw. While Gandhi used shared Hindu spirituality to unite millions against the British, it also, without meaning to, alienated many people in a country with so many different faiths.
So non-Hindus, and especially the huge Muslim population, started to get scared. They worried that in a democratic India where Hindus would be the majority, their rights just wouldn't be protected. And this fear led to the explosive final debate. Should the subcontinent be one single unified country, or should it be partitioned into a Hindu-majority India and a Muslim-majority Pakistan?
As that debate raged, the country just exploded into religious violence. Before independence was even officially declared, an estimated 1 million people were killed in brutal clashes between Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs. The violence got so bad that it ultimately convinced the leaders on all sides that splitting the country was the only way to stop the bloodshed.
And the tragedy here is almost Shakespearean. For Gandhi, this was the ultimate failure. The single greatest achievement of his entire life, independence, was completely drowned out by the exact same hatred and violence he had fought against his whole life. He was just heartbroken.
But even with the horror of partition, you can't deny the movement's incredible global legacy. India's victory was really the first major crack in the British Empire, and it inspired decolonization movements all over the world. And of course, Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolent resistance would be picked up by leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and completely change the course of American history.
So, we end up right back where we started, with this paradox. India's path to freedom proves that a strong, shared identity can be a powerful, incredible force for liberation. But it also leaves us with a question that is still so urgent for nations everywhere today. How do you build a national identity that creates a sense of belonging for some without excluding or even endangering others?